Thank you so much for coming, so many of you, and so nice to see so many faces and new people here. So when I was invited to do this talk, I was thinking about my last visit at the Northwest Designer Craft Artists annual gathering, and I got several questions from. I mean, I got a question for several people that it's so nice that I do wall hangings and wall art, but why don't I use this technique to make wearable art? So I will do this talk of basically built around my career, my artist career, and how my journey ended up where I am at the moment. I started fighting 20 years ago, and I encountered fighting um, mm, even 10 years prior, but I wasn't interested in it at all because wet fiber was not attractive to me, and we didn't have access to good quality of fibers back then. And so until I met this combination of hand-dyed colors and merino wool and silk, I was not really attracted to felting. But around 2004 and 5, there was a woman in Hungary, Anna Vidak, and she introduced this technique. She came back from Norway and she started teaching this so-called nunofelting technique, where we combine hand-dyed silk with merino wool. And this way, the textures and the colors and the possibilities, they completely blew my mind. And I kind of refer to it as an addiction, sort of like a healthy addiction. So I think there was no school to go to learn felting, so I had to explore everything on my own. And I took a few workshops, but most of my lessons were learned in the studio. And I think I was very fortunate because I was introduced to a woman from Prague, from the Czech Republic, and she just opened a store for Hungarian artists. And she saw some potential in me, and she invited me to provide felt for her gallery. And I worked for her for 15 years, and I kind of refer to this period as my training. When I was working for her, I always experimented, and I wanted to explore, and I wanted to stretch the boundaries of fighting. That's how I got it. Thinking of different problems and how to fix them, that kept my attention, kept me engaged. So since it was a little gallery in downtown Prague, the majority of the work I made for her was wearable art. So here's a hat that I played with different shapes and designs. And this one I integrated some sari silk with metallic. It's not embroidery, but it's a metallic woven design in the sari. And when it's captured by the wool and it shrinks with the wool, it provides a really beautiful texture. I was, as I say, I was always interested in how to solve different problems. So this opportunity that I can make seamless shapes and basically sculpt with the wool, it was one of the most interesting part for me. Probably the very first hat I ever made had this design on the side. It was a spiral, and originally it was in the back because I was wearing long hair and in a bun, and I needed space for my bun, and that's how this design was born. And slowly transitioned to the side of the hat, and It was one of my signature hats I made for many years. Process always invites me to explore new ideas. So then the spiral on the side of the hat started growing, and that's how these muffin hats. And then I wanted to explore bigger, more sculptural shapes. So I was experimenting with book resist and trying to figure out how I can make the different shapes and forms and how to sculpt with the wool. This was another piece made by a book resist. And this kind of takes me to more and more of sculpting and structural felting. So there's another example here that kept me up at night a few times, how we could make a bag with width. So it's not just a flat pocket, but it's still seamlessly felted. Another example of this idea. The decoration here is from the stripes are hand-dyed silk, but the wool is the base, and that's what's holding everything together. And the strap is also seamlessly felted. And then when we work with hollow shapes, there are so many things to do. It really engages the brain that we can make slippers of different kinds. We can make gloves and mittens. We can make key holders. And while I was making these small pieces, consider them my felting school, I experimented how to integrate, how to capture various materials with the wool. So some of them has beads, some of them has a printed sari silk or various yarns. There are samples. I tried to open them more in dimension in 3D, so I started playing with floral shapes. These are felting really blows my mind because we can work on really small scale. So these are basically jewelry pendants, but in Mongolia and in Central Asia, they still make yurts out of felt. So and we can do everything in between. Here are a few more experiments with various shapes that could be used in felted embroidery. I was experimenting how to embed rock beads and pebbles in felt, and I keep going back to sculpting with wool. It's just it's what we can do. And more sculpting on a small scale, more pendants, and textures were also very important for me, playing with different textures, and inspiration often comes from nature. But when I started felting, I was very fortunate. I had a job in the Hungarian Heritage House as a organizing workshops, all kinds of folk arts. But when in Hungary, there's this opportunity when a woman gives birth to a child, they can stay with the child for 3 years. And I have 2 children, so I took this 6 years that I basically learned the foundation of the craft of felt making, and then I made a big decision to leave the office job and financial security, and I wanted to become a full-time felt maker. So here are some small sculptures that I made for my children when they were young. And then back to the gallery work, I made lots and lots of scarves, mainly hats and scarves. That was the majority of the work that I shipped to Prague. So here are some examples of various scarves. I learned a lot about composition and how to play with the colors and color blending, how to play with the textures, and how to combine different materials. So I feel like while I was working and sending these objects to the gallery, I was still studying what I was already studying. And I also learned basically a lot about differential shrinkage unknowingly. I mean, I didn't even know it had a name, but here in these carves, I was playing with the directions of the fibers. It's probably more meaningful for file makers. So the felt that didn't shrink evenly, they didn't shrink proportionally. That's how I could get to all these ruffles. And I had lots of experiments how to make the thinnest fabric possible. So I started using the thinnest, most lightweight silk that was available on the market. This the base for these scarves is 3 mummy silk chiffon. So this is the most lightweight silk. And I put a blend of 20% black silk and 80% white wool on the silk. And with the soap and water and rubbing and forcing the wool fiber to migrate through the weave of the silk, I could create this beautiful texture. It reminds me of a birch bark. So here the base was a silk, and then the black fibers are also silk, but there's some white wool that's gathering the silk and holding them together. And then and the experiments, they kept coming in all kinds of shapes. So this is a large shawl, and I was really hooked on the idea for a while that with this technique we can make seamless garments, seamlessly fitted garments. So these garments are hollow shapes and felted around the resist, consciously using the amount of the wool and the direction of the fiber. We can really nicely shape the garments. There are a few pictures of garments I made of these dresses. These are also seamlessly felted. The one on the right and the one in the middle are actually the same dress. So the picture on the left, the picture on the left is the silk side of the same garment as we see in the middle. So the black silk tones the color of the red, because the red fiber eventually migrates through the weave of the silk. But in the left picture, we see both the silk and the wool color. From a distance, we see optical color blending, so it doesn't look so bright as when we see the wool side. I was also interested how to create seamlessly felted hoods on these garments, and then this kind of vest evolved, where I got inspiration from marble surfaces. So I was looking for natural surface design or something that looks very organic. Another seamlessly felted garment. This was made from sari silks. Another one with the marble design. The more I made these garments, I fell in love with the texture and the colors and the design, and I was kept looking them on the table, and I thought to myself, if I keep making these garments, unfortunately they end up in a closet for 350 days a year, very likely. When people buy them, they want to take good care of them and they don't wear it every day. But I was thinking I should make something that's more visible. I wanted to that's how I started creating pieces for the wall. So now in these, in the next pictures, that's what we see now, these wall pieces and how I got to the current stage, what I'm doing at the moment. The very first ones were inspired by the marble surfaces. Most of the color that we see here comes from silk, both silk fabrics and silk fibers. And it's basically a mosaic where I use the wool to hold these pieces together in the felting. And there are a few more where I was playing with different shapes and colors. While I was making wearable art, I was very focused on creating perfect shapes. The hats had to have the perfect brim. The circle has to be perfect. The square had to be perfect. And then when I started making these wall art pieces, I realized that felting is not bound to any instruments, and I got really interested in creating with pieces with organic shapes, organic edges. So I wanted to go with the flow of the silk that I used. And always the colors were very important. So from the very beginning, the colors I use, I mainly dye them, both the silk and the wool. And the combination is always a little different. It's a little magic. This is a nice close-up where you can see when I refer to the optical color blending, the red wool is coming through the dark navy silk. I mean, it mostly shows on the dark silk, but it comes through all the silk pieces. And from a distance, it doesn't look neither red nor navy. It looks somewhere in between. And that time, I was still interested in making functional art, so I made quite a few pillows too, still in marble surfaces. And then there were these pieces inspired by birch bark, birch forest. The rich wrinkled texture comes from the silk. And then a few more pieces with this idea. The challenge of these pieces that there's a big shrinkage we have to account in the felting process. So the thinner the fabric, the more it shrinks. In my studio, I have two 4x8 table surfaces, but when these large pieces shrink somewhere between 30–40%, I have to start the layout really large. So my 4x8 tables are not big enough, and most often I can work only on a section at a time. And it was especially challenging when I made this piece that I couldn't see the whole piece when I was laying down the silk. I barely saw half of it, and then I had to cover it with wool, rub it in a little bit so it stays in place, and then move on to the next section and the next section. And a couple of days later, it was a big surprise when I opened it. It came together. So with these pieces, I was very interested in playing with the colors and the optical color blending, but I felt I needed more texture to these pieces. So I was exploring how you can add more depth to these felts. This one was an idea where I was playing with the so-called cracked mud technique, where there are layers separated with the resist, and then it's cut in the process, and the base is a little revealed here and there. There's a little folded edge around this organic pattern. I was thinking about another idea, how you can add more dimension to these pieces. So I attached the ruffles on the base of the felt, but it still was not exactly what I was looking for, although I really liked this look and how I could play with these also hand-dyed colors. And then I developed this concept where I started with a large piece of a synthetic fabric. So in this case, it's not even silk. And using many hand-cut pieces of resists of different shapes, I could partially felt this synthetic fabric in the base, in the wool base. So where I had those resists, this heavily wrinkled pockets of fabric, they stay apart from the base. In the process, I removed all the resist, all the plastic, and when it was completely felted and fulled, then the shrinking of the wool pulled the synthetic fabric, and that's how these wrinkles were born. This is another example for the same idea on a different concept. So here I made I lay down a kind of a grid shape of the resist between the synthetic organza and the wool. And then again, in the process, I removed all the plastic, but in the place where I had the plastic, the organza couldn't connect to the wool. So that's how I got this really nice rich texture and the rich grid pattern. It's another example for the same concept. This was inspired by tree rings. When I was making this, I was thinking, now I really like the texture. It's really rich, but I have a lot of limitation with the colors. So even though this one has a little more than the previous ones, because I start with one large piece of fabric, I have only color choices, how I use the wool. And since the wool is coming through the silk, it's never so bright and never so it's always a little harder to control how it looks like, but I like a little more control over the use of the color than I could do in these pieces. That took me to another concept. By this time, I've been making felt for over 15 years, and I had a lot of scraps. So I started thinking I need to use my silk scraps. There must be a way to use them. So I started cutting the silk pieces into small random shapes, and I arranged them on my table like beautiful rose petals. And then the little pieces of silks were covered with two layers of wool. And like we do in the wet felting process, I wetted it with soapy water, and I started rubbing the wool fiber through the weave of the silk. So all the many little pieces of silk were touched by the wool. Here I could make beautiful, colorful pieces with the same idea. I was using the small pieces of the silk basically in place of a paintbrush. And this one I added a little bit of synthetic organza to have the more textured part, but most of it is basically hand-dyed silk. And then there was a long break in my felting career. The COVID came, and solitude is very hard. After a couple of months, when the winter came and Seattle is so dark and gray, I told my husband I better go to work for someone else, and they pay me, or I have to go to see a therapist and I have to leave a lot of money there. I looked for some jobs, and I found a landscaping company who hired me, and I took almost 2 years off from felting, and I worked for a few landscaping companies, and it was an amazing life-changing experience for me. I not only learned about the plants and nature and the desires of the plants and how to care about them, I also learned about landscaping and garden design, and I very soon realized that there are so many similarities in garden design and felting, because it's all about texture and color and shape and design and layers. So basically 2 years went by. I tried to keep my felting going with some online workshops, but it was not a full-time job for these years. And when I came back from landscaping, then I realized that I have a very different approach. And then this new series of work was born. And I think it was an excellent time that I could get away from felting. It was maybe we could refer to the like a sabbatical, and I could rest my brain and I could rest my ideas. And when I came back to the space, I had a lot of new ideas and very different approach. I still use a lot of silk, but now I could make those abstract pictures that I really like. I'm most attracted to abstract pictures that spark conversation, but they don't have one specific meaning. They have several layers, and I like how when people look at these pieces, everybody has a different association and how different conversations are sparked. I put this picture vertical and horizontal to show that most of them can be hung either way. It doesn't yeah, it's not decided upfront. um, the the little ruffles that I arranged on the table, the little pleats of the silk, the size of them, the rhythm of them, and the frequency, they create these abstract pictures. And here I had this opportunity that I could play with the changing the background color. So here it transitions from the yellow to the dark, almost eggplant, but I also have the control to play with the colors in the ruffles. And this is what I really, really like. And then the shape of the pleats can be also playful. Here and in the next picture where we see different color, it comes from a different dye bath of silk. So there are so many cuts in one row of silk. And then I can also change the orientation of the pleats, make different patterns. And frequency. And I like the close-up to show how the colors that come through the wool fibers, how they influence the colors on the surface. Because the pleats, they show us the color of the silk, but we have so much wool on the surface, on the silk, it completely changes the color of the silk. And then I can play also with the width of the silk, yeah, how one stripe flows in the next one. In 2023, I got artist residency in Central Oregon, and it was pretty much a dream come true. I got access to this most beautiful workshop place. It was freshly finished, and I was the first resident who could use it. It was amazing and mind-blowing to just spread out with my materials and spread out with the design and have complete freedom on creating. So here we can see pictures of the process. The really fun part in this residency was they could provide me with 2 tables, both 4 by 8 feet, and they were on wheels, so I could move them around in the space. And I did. So first, I decided to make a piece where the tables were pushed together on the longer side. So the starting size of this piece was 8 by 8 feet. Here you can see the stripes of the silk that are pre-cut. Approximately, I tried to cut them to the same width, but it's hand cut, so it's not exactly precise. And then I start laying down the pattern on the table. There will be a picture later that when I start these large pieces, I have a drawing. I mean, I have a couple of drawings, and with the drawing, I crystallized the composition and the design in my mind, but it's not very accurate, and it's not life size. So it's a small sketch that guides my hand and my brain through the process. It's a combination of planning and improvising at the same time. On the left side, we see the piece. The silk was laid down. All these little strips are the pleats that I already arranged. Once the table was completely covered with, I mean, the two tables, I covered them with the silk. After I pushed them together, then I realized that covering the whole thing with wool is not as easy anymore, because reaching through the table in the middle, which is 4 feet from the edge, yeah, I'm just not tall enough. So I was dreaming about suspended over the table, but that didn't happen. So I had to basically cover half of the silk layout. I put some plywood on top, and I could climb on the table and cover the wall and very carefully move on, and without damaging the layout. And on the right, we see the piece when it's still wet, and it's almost finished, almost shrunk to the right size. In the process, when I start rubbing the wool through the silk, I also have to lift these pleats a million times. So unless I lift them several times, the wool is so strong. This fine 19 micron merino wool is strong enough so it would capture even the little pleats, and it would keep them completely flat. Here you can see the little sketch that I started my work with. This piece was actually inspired by butterfly wings. When we look at the butterfly wings under a microscope and we magnify them, we see the beautiful patterns of the scales. And then this is how it looks like after it was finished. When I finished these pieces, I let them dry, and then I build a wooden frame, and I stretch and staple the felt on the back of the frame. So it's fairly, I mean, it's really nicely stretched on the frame. And then I still have a choice, and I can play with the directions of the ruffles. But sometimes I just lay them flat, basically wrap them flat, wrap them one direction, like what we see in this one. In some of the previous pictures, I brush them up a little bit, and they stay perpendicular to the base. Sometimes I iron them, and they become completely flat. So there's still little playfulness in this part. And then still in this residency, I thought this is a very unusual chance that I have the space. The space itself was way bigger than my studio, and then having the tables on the wheels. So I decided to push the tables together on the shorter side. And now the starting size of this felt was 16 feet, 4 feet wide and 16 feet long. Instead of cutting the skinny stripes of silk, I used the whole width of the bolt of the silk. So it's the hand-dyed silk in the whole width of the piece. And I still do the hand pleats in the silk. create those ruffles. Another little detail here is the sample on the table. Each time I make a large piece, I try to make samples so I can test how the silk, the hand-dyed silk, works with the wool that I want to put behind the silk. And this is after felting. So the one that started 16 feet long and 9 feet long. I really tried to work thin in this with these pieces, because the thinner the felt, the thinner I lay the wool, the more it shrinks, and the more it shrinks, the more beautiful ruffles I get. This is another piece where I was really happy with this very organic shape of the edges. This was inspired by sedges of the fall colors in Central Oregon. And then there was more organic shapes. So once when I realized that I don't have to have squares and rectangulars, I really enjoy making these organically shaped pieces. And it was still in the residency where I did hikes as many as I could around the ranch, and I found some amazing mushrooms, the biggest lobster mushrooms I have ever seen. One lobster mushroom, or not lobster, was it? I think one cap of the mushroom was as large as my basket. So it was humongous. While I was cutting them up and cooking them, I was playing with the gears and how it looks from the bottom. That's how this series started. So it's a little the white one is the one that was first, the very first piece. Right, I decided that I can try to work with just black light and see how it goes. And all the silk, I used different kinds of silks for different textures and different looks. They have different sheen and luster. And when I combine it with the black wool, it provides a little depth, I like. But then I realized that most walls around us, many of them are white or in exhibiting spaces. So then I started dyeing these pieces. So the ones we see at the moment and the next few ones are actually not dyed prior to the process. I arranged all the pleats. I did the felting and everything, and then with deep dyeing, I could create gradation in the color. But I still have the black wood in the base, because that's how I can play with the different color in the silk and the wool. I like how these very organic shapes bring the Pacific Northwest nature ambience into modern. I was very fortunate last year. I got a commission from a cybersecurity company, and they invited me to create a large piece for their tech hub. So this was commissioned, and now it's hanging on the 34th skyscraper in Seattle. Besides the mushrooms, the other inspiration here is the lichen. Lichens of the Pacific Northwest are beautiful, leafy, shrubby, extremely textured lichens, and not just the textures, but the colors are striking, especially when they get wet. So I tried to recreate something that evokes that feeling in you when you touch or see such lichens in nature without actually recreating them. This year I had an exhibit in Seattle, a solo exhibit where it was hosted by the Labor Temple in Belltown. That's where we could do these beautiful shots in these interiors. These pieces were also inspired by the lichens. And the more I worked with these lichens, the more I wanted to play again with the shapes. So in these last few slides, what we see is the very sculpted pieces. Here I went back a little bit if you remember the scarves I told about the differential shrinkage. When I play with the directions of the fibers, I can create the fabric that stretches more sideways than in the length. So playing with differential shrinkage, I can really beautifully sculpt these pieces and stretch them and shape them in space. And this will be the last slide for this presentation. This is another lichen from this from this show from the Labor Temple. The back of the lichen was black, so where the edges are folded you can see the original wool fiber, and the surface, the top is completely white wool. So when we see a grayish edge or frame around the edge, that's the fiber coming through. So it's wool, the black wool coming through the white wool. But I wanted to add a little silk fiber, so the just raw carded silk fiber provides this beautiful luster and texture on the edges. These pieces were a little challenging to hang, so finally I came up with this idea where I laid them on a very thin plywood, and I sketch the shape of them on the plywood. Then I cut it out with a jigsaw. I used the Velcro tape on the plywood, and basically the Velcro holds these pieces perfectly safe and secure. So that's how they are hung on the back. At the moment, this is the last slide I prepared. I think I'm gonna stop at the screen sharing, so we can do some questions.
Thank you so much, Flora. That was beautiful, wonderful.
Thank you.